shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with End Time Ministries, and I thank you for joining me for Thursday's edition of End of the Age. Now, we specialize in Bible prophecy here. We use current events to show how prophecies written 2,000 to 2,500 years ago are coming to pass right now, letting us know that we absolutely are in the end time just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. We say that because all of the prophecies are converging at the same time. Years ago, I talked to my father-in-law, Irvin Baxter, and he would say, you know, every once in a great while, he would come across something that let him know that a prophecy was fulfilled. But now, even with our research team here, we can't keep up with everything. I mean, I get news articles literally from people all over the world. And occasionally we'll hear of something that happened 6 months ago and our research team here didn't even catch it. And so everything is happening so fast. And so what we do is we watch the prophecies of the Bible and use current events to show how they're coming to pass. Now, some of the most recognizable prophecies that we watch all the time: the peace agreement, we watch what's going on in the Middle East for the Sixth Trumpet War, the world religion that's going to be established, precursors to the mark of the beast, and one of the most recognizable ones is the world government that will be established and be in power at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, you can read about it starting all the way back in Daniel chapter 2. And then it's prophesied about it, builds up to it, and it's finally revealed for us, the prophecy in Revelation chapter 13. So let's talk about the world government prophecy. And then I'm going to show you on today's program just one of the ways. There is a plethora of ways that it's being implemented in the world as we speak. I'm going to go through one of those. And so that's what we'll get into on today's program, the prophecy of the world government and how it's already established and being implemented in the earth today. So the prophecy is found in Revelation 13, verse 1 through 8, and it describes the end-time world government and the leader of that entity, the Antichrist, as the beast. When it refers to the beast, it's referring to both the world government and the Antichrist. Now, another characteristic that I want to mention before I get into the crux of my program here is that of the same beast is found in Revelation 17:3, and that is that the beast is a scarlet or red-colored beast. Well, from the prophecy of the first four seals found in Revelation 6, verse 1 through 8, along with further clues given in Zechariah chapter 6, verse 1 through 8, we know that the red spirit controlling the ideologies of a segment of mankind today is communism or socialism. For example, red Russia, red China. You know about the red. When you familiarize yourself in your ideologies of the world, red is communistic. So from these two prophecies, Revelation 13, Revelation 17, we can prove, and Revelation chapter 6 and Zechariah 6, we can prove that the end-time world government will be a socialistic world governing body, which is very key to what I'm fixing to talk about. However, really the most odious aspect of this entire prophecy is found in Revelation 13:2, which states, "And the dragon, which is Satan, gave him his power, his seat, and his great authority. So the identity of the dragon is found in Revelation 12:9. It states, and to the great dragon was cast out that old serpent, the devil, and Satan. So what do we learn from this? Tying all these prophecies together, we learn that the end-time world government will be a socialistic entity that will be ruled by a physical man, the Antichrist, and that he will receive his power, seat, and great authority from Satan himself. Yeah, that's right. Satan is setting the agenda for the current world governing entities on the earth today, and it is a direct fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Now, I'm going to talk about one aspect of the world government, and that's the United Nations and efforts they're making towards governing the entire world. But there are many entities that are established in the world today that make up the world government. The World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, the International Criminal Court. There are many of them. But probably the most recognizable one is the United Nations. And in many ways, they're trying to push their agenda in the world. Global warming, climate change, wealth redistribution. I mean, they just got their fingers in everything. But I'm going to talk about what they're trying to do, even here in the United States, to push the global governing agenda. And one of the main ways they're doing that is to promote the wealth redistribution and control in our schools. So it's very important that, because you need to know what your children are taught at school. Very, very critical. Because what they're saying is, hey, you know, the 40, 50, 60, 70-year-olds, we're not going to change their mind. They're set in their ways. But what we do is, if we can train the next generation coming up, they'll be so indoctrinated that we'll have the global society that we want. And these will be already indoctrinated global citizens. So their main push is to teach it in our schools. And so let me get off into the meat of my program here. The Newman Report states that the UN boss urges schools to promote wealth redistribution and control. Of course, wealth redistribution is one of the main platforms of communism or socialism. And since the United Nations is a socialistic, it was designed from its inception to be a socialistic one world governing body, they push wealth redistribution. So the UN boss is pushing for wealth redistribution and control to be taught in our schools around the world. So recently, in an interview with an arm of the official United Nations propaganda machine, UN General Assembly President Peter Thompson said that he is working with governments worldwide to indoctrinate children into supporting the totalitarian Agenda 2030. Now, I'll get to the Agenda 2030 here in just a little bit. Let me go through this right here, and then I'll define it for you. And so he's trying to get them to support the Agenda 2030, produced by the Dictators Club or the United Nations. And indeed, the school curricula in every country must incorporate the UN's so-called Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. And for those who are still unfamiliar with the totalitarian UN Agenda 2030, it's essentially a recipe for global socialism and technocracy. It calls for international wealth redistribution, total government control over economic production, indoctrination of our children, and really much more. I'll get into it in great detail here in a little bit. The scheme vows to transform our world, Agenda 2030, transform our world and leave no one behind. Top UN leaders call for the declaration of interdependence, not independence. They want to do away with the nation states. Brutal dictators and mass murderers from all around the world, socialists, communists, Islamists, and more, fervently endorse this plan. And the communist Chinese regime, which has murdered more than any government in human history, boasted through its propaganda organs of its crucial role in creating the UN Master Plan for humanity. It's called Agenda 2030, Transforming Our World. But now the children have to be brought on board, is what they're saying. We got to train the next generation coming up. And speaking to the Africa Renewal, a project of the Africa section of the UN Department of Public Information, the UN boss, or Thompson, highlighted everything he has done to promote the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals around the world. He said schools in particular are at the very center of it. He knows he's got to indoctrinate the children, with the children described in the document as critical agents of change. They train up the child in a way that it should go, and it won't depart from it. So when they get out of high school, they get out of college, if they've got the global mindset, I'm a global citizen, then they'll buy into it. You don't have to indoctrinate them. You have to change their mind. They've already been taught. Thompson was quoted as saying, "One of the things I have done is to write every head of government worldwide, asking them to set the Sustainable Development Goals into school curricula in their countries." He said, "I think it's important because when I look at my 3 grandchildren who are under 10 years of age, I wonder how they will ever learn about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, unless I, as their grandfather, tell them. It is at school that they can really learn about the global goals, though." And just last month, this same Newman report that I'm reporting from highlighted similar outrageous comments by Thompson and other UN leaders, boasting of how they would use education to brainwash children into becoming agents for change and drivers of innovative ways of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We also exposed that they also exposed UN documents pointing out that real education was in fact a threat to sustainability. Thompson offered more chilling details on how the UN intends to weaponize children via education. He states, "Youth are the most important part of this transformation. They will live their lives with the success or failure of the Sustainable Development Goals." So, in addition to getting governments to brainwash children in school, Thompson says that he went to Los Angeles to get Hollywood and the entertainment industry to peddle the dangerous UN-backed ideologies in the so-called entertainment. Have you ever you've heard recently of some of these Hollywood stars and things backing the United Nations humanistic solutions to things and global warming, i.e., Leonardo DiCaprio, different people like that, George Clooney. You've heard of a lot of them. It's because they've been coerced into promoting this. He also went to Silicon Valley to get the big tech companies on board. Propaganda in the media and entertainment will be very important, according to them. Education, though, is going to be the key. That's what they think. And the Agenda 2030 itself makes that clear. In goal number 4, for example, the document, which has not been ratified by the U.S. Senate, demands that all children learn not to just accept and submit to sustainable development living, but actually to promote sustainable development. The UN has made it crystal clear that it intends to hijack education to indoctrinate children around the world into globalism, or the process of moving into a global governing society, and stateism, which is a political system in which the state has substantial centralized control over social and economic affairs, socialism, pseudo-environmentalism, and other fringe ideologies. This is what they want to push. The American people must make it equally clear that they will never submit to this. We can't have this forced on our schools. You need to know what's your school. And I'm going to prove to you that this stuff was set in motion years ago. It's not going to be set in motion this year. It's been set in motion years ago. You need to understand what your school, what your children are being taught in their schools. It's very, very critical. And so understand, are they being taught sustainable development principles? Are they being taught the green agenda? What are they being taught? because you don't want them to come out of high school and out of college as global citizens. And I've already I had a college student come into my office. He had just graduated with a very nice degree, I might add, came in my office and tried to convince me that the United Nations was absolutely needed for our world society to function. We needed the Federal Reserve, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Brookings Institute. These were all good institutions. And I had to educate this individual on, I don't know what you learned in college, but these are horrible institutions. This is a global governing society that's being set up. And we had quite the interesting conversation. But he had been indoctrinated by college. And when he came out, he was totally a global citizen. And so that's where they're headed. That's what all of the borderless talk is all about. Do away with the borders. Just have one global community that answers to a world government. That's what they're being taught. Now, the New American reports that globalists, those that believe in a world government, and the UN know that to achieve their vision of global totalitarianism, the minds of the young must be captured via education. That's my point today. Be careful and know what your kids are being taught in school and what's the agenda behind it. You say, oh, they're not pushing an agenda in our schools. Oh, absolutely they are. You need to know what those agendas are. Talk to the teachers. Know what they're being taught. Agenda 2030 actually has an entire goal dedicated to the UN-guided education. A recent summit in Korea organized for NGOs by the UN Department of Public Information was aimed at defining what that education regime will look like and how NGOs can help. The adopted action plan, they actually have an action plan for this, states this. It says, education is a human right, essential to well-being and dignity, and is key to achieving Agenda 2030. So this is their goal. They know exactly what they're trying to do. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals that is encapsulated in Agenda 2030, that's what they're pushing. And they know we have to educate the next generation coming. Now, further in the agenda, it says, an ethos of global citizenship is required in order to fulfill this bold, people-centered, universal, and planet-sensitive development framework. In the spirit of global citizenship, they state that our primary identity is that of human beings. So in the UN's view, according to the Jinju Action Plan, adopted in Korea, education must advance the cause of global citizenship. And I just talked to a college student here just a few months ago, and I can see this. I mean, I saw it in right before my very eyes. He had been indoctrinated all the way through college to where he'd come out and said, the United Nations is our last great hope for mankind. No, it's the last great hope for the globalists that want a world government, but it's not our last great hope. Our only hope is in Jesus Christ. That's it. Not any world government. Don't want to be any part of that. So this actually means a lot more than one might think. Among other points, this education for global citizenship must promote integrated development of the whole person. Get this. This is the United Nations, their goal, to develop the whole person emotionally, ethically, intellectually, physically, socially, and spiritually. Say spiritually, what's the United Nations got to do with that? The action plan actually declares this. You wonder why there's a world religion being formed right now? It's to support this and to bring all the religions under one ideology, one umbrella where they will support this world government, because the world government is the goal at the end of the day. Now, of course, most of you will know that up until just a few years ago, or maybe a decade or two ago, that in order to promote these ideologies, it was the role of the parents and families, communities, or even tribes and churches more and more have traditionally been responsible for those different ideologies in a person's life. Their spirituality. But now the education pushed by the UN must also be, they say, imbued with an understanding of our roles, rights, and responsibilities for the common good in service to humanity and the advancement of a culture of peace, nonviolence, freedom, justice, and equality. The action plan continues by saying that they need to use rhetoric about the common good that has been the rallying cry of countless tyrants. The common good, or the global citizen. That's what they're trying to create here. Somebody who doesn't want to stand for their nation, but for the world as a whole. Not do away with nation states and have this global community that answers to a one world governing body. That's the goal behind all of this. That's the goal. The United Nations was created from its inception to be a socialistic one world governing body. The United Nations is not a good humanitarian organization. Their original charter, written by Alger Hiss, who was a convicted communist spy. So you got to understand all this. You got to understand the history of it to know really what's their goal. World government, world government, world government. That's the goal here. So the global education must inculcate a sense of care for the earth, reverence for interdependent kinship of all life, and stewardship of all ecological systems for future generations. It should also strengthen the societal relationships among individuals, institutions, communities, states, humanity, and the planet, because they all believe that the planet is a brother and a sister of ours. That's what they spin. And finally, it should nurture a sense of solidarity and empathy in order to end poverty, protect the planet, ensure human rights, and foster prosperous and fulfilling lives for all. Now, that right there sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? No, not at the end of the day. Not if you know that the goal behind it all. Remember, who's the driver? Who's the mastermind behind all of this? The Bible tells us that Satan will be. He's trying to create his own world government here on the earth. And his number one agent in the near future is going to be the Antichrist. That's the driver behind all of this. Do I want that indoctrination in my child? Absolutely not. I don't want them teaching my child these sustainable development goals. And so it's very important you understand what your child is being taught. Now, some of you might be saying, oh, that's in communist China, or that's in Russia, or that's in South America somewhere, not here in the United States, right? Well, the U.S. Department of Education, this is the archived education from them. On September 21st, 2010, got to give you a little history here. Then Secretary of Education Arne Duncan gave the keynote address at the Sustainability Education Summit. He said the greening of the Department of Education, Secretary, this is his Duncan's remarks at the Sustainability Summit. He said, thank you, now this is United States Department of Education, thank you for your leadership on this vital issue and for being part of our summit on sustainability. This event is a big deal for our team at the Department of Education. Until now, we've been mostly absent from the movement to educate our children to be stewards of our environment and to prepare them to participate in a sustainable economy. That work is taking hold in corporations, in other agencies of the federal government, as well as colleges, universities, and schools across the country. United States of America, folks. This week's Sustainability Summit represents the first time that the department is taking a leadership role in the work of educating the next generation of green citizens and preparing them to contribute to the workforce through green jobs. Now, at that time, obviously, Barack Obama was president. He said President Obama has made clean, renewable energy a priority because, as he says, it's the best way to truly transform our economy, to protect our security, and save our planet. He goes on to state that educators have a central role in this. A well-educated citizen knows that we must now act in this generation in ways that endanger the next. And they teach students about how the climate is changing, which is a hoax. Many of you know how I feel on that already. And they explain the science behind climate change and how they can change our daily practices to help save the planet. They have a role in preparing students for jobs in the green economy. Historically, the Department of Education, now that's the United States Department of Education, hasn't been doing enough in the sustainability movement. But he said, today, I promise you that we will be a committed partner in the national effort to build a more environmentally literate and responsible society. Several agencies across the federal government already have made important contributions linking education and sustainability. The National Science Foundation has created a network of projects that are advancing programs that teach about the impact of climate change. That's propaganda from the United Nations. We at the Education Department are energized about joining these leaders in their commitment to preparing today's students to participate in the green economy. And to be well educated about the science of sustainability, we must advance the sustainability movement through education. Educate the new generation. Now, folks, this speech was given by Arnie Duncan almost 7 years ago. That was given in September of 2010. Here we are in 2017. And he was saying that they were going to be implementing this in colleges, in trade schools, in schools all across our country 7 years ago. So where do you think they're at right now with it? Well, we'll get into some of these different answers and more on educating our students to promote the Sustainable Development Goals signed onto in 2015 by all the nations of the world and the United Nations global governing entity.
Through the years, we have seen God perform miracle after miracle at End Time Ministries, and we are trusting God for another season of miracles this summer. So we decided that we wanted to share our miraculous story and boost your faith by offering you one of our newest DVDs titled The Miracle Called End Time for free with any purchase of $29 or more. To request your copy, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and mention the code MIRACLE or order online at endtime.com.
Most people have dreamed of someday walking on the ground where Jesus walked over 2,000 years ago. You don't have to wait any longer. Make this the year for your life-changing experience. This is your official invitation to join Judy and me for our 2017 Fall End Time Prophecy Tour. The trip of a lifetime is a severe understatement. If you could travel to any place on earth, your first choice should definitely be the Holy Land. There is simply no other place like it. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 for more information. Ask to speak to Holly or Jana about the tour.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the Watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the Archives button.
Now, folks, as you can tell, the United Nations has a very, very extremely focused goal. They've got a focused agenda. What are they trying to do? They're trying to establish a world governing body in the earth. It's the same world government prophesied to be in power at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ. And they know that to get this thing implemented, that they're not going to come in and somebody who's my age change my mind. I'm set in my ways, that's not going to happen. But they're not focused on me. They know and I've just talked about it, that it's very critical that they get a hold of the minds of our children and indoctrinate them. You see, this is not an overnight set of goals they have. This is a long-term play. They want to have a world government, and they know, so the 30, 40, 50, well, let's say the 40, 50, 60, 70-year-olds, those people are set in their ways. We're not going to get them. So we're going to educate these people coming up, and we're going to indoctrinate them. And when they get out of high school, when they get out of college, they're going to believe the United Nations is just the most awesome thing since sliced bread. When in all actuality, it's horrible. It's socialistic. A lot of them think socialism's a good thing. I'm like, you got to be, socialism leads to communism. The basis between them is the same thing. And so consequently, it's very important that we understand United Nations, a very bad thing. Remember, who's the driver behind the world government? Satan. Give him his seat, power, and great authority. The Antichrist is eventually going to usurp authority over this. So it's not a good thing. We're not going to want to have anything to do with it. But yet it's got its tentacles in the United States already, because of the past several administrations have signed us on to a lot of this stuff. And so you wonder why they fight Donald Trump so much, because he's pulling us out of some of it. And they cannot stand him for it. And so they're fighting against him on every side. He can't do anything right because he's bucking the establishment, a global establishment and the establishment here in the United States, which they all have the same goal. They want a world government. And that's why they can't stand Donald Trump, because he's standing against some of that stuff. And forget politics. Take all that. Let's take that out of it. The fact that anybody would say anything or to pull us out of the Paris Climate Agreement or want to build a wall. Forget, I don't care who it is. They do not like that. They're absolutely against that, because it doesn't go along with their plan for this world government that they've got this very focused agenda on. It's the Agenda 2030. By 2030, they want to have all these 17 Sustainable Development Goals met. So you say, well, where are we at right now in the Department of Education? Well, according to the U.S. Department of Education's 2016 Strategic Sustainability Performance Plan, they state this: as this summary highlights, this is last year, the U.S. Department of Education continues its commitment. Remember, Arnie Duncan's speech was given in 2010. They say last year that the Department of Education continues its commitment to exploring other potential opportunities for integrating sustainability into our mission, the mission of the Department of Education, including incorporation of provisions for sustainable building design in grants and loans, targeting for infrastructure improvements at academic institutions, and giving priority to grants to career and technical schools and community colleges that offer sustainability education programs. Now, this is the United States Department of Education. So can you see the agenda here? We got to get a hold of those young minds in grade school, high school, the technical colleges, the academic colleges. We've got to get a hold of all of them and get them thinking on a global scale. And get them thinking globally, not United States Declaration of Independence. We want them thinking Declaration of Independence globally. So when they're handed down edicts from a global government, they're going to be fine with that. We need to make them think the United Nations is a very, very good thing, not a bad thing. And so we've got to be the truth. We've got to tell them the truth and say, no, don't want to have any part of that. And so that's why you need to make sure you understand what your kids are being taught at school. Now, I want to get into the Agenda 2030 because some of you may not even have a clue what that is. And I want to give you a little history. So at this point, I know we've got new audiences all the time. We just went on a huge station here in Dallas, KAAM, 770 AM. And I know that there are some of you that are saying, what in the world is Agenda 2030? I've never even heard of that. Well, what I've got to do to really explain what it is, I've got to provide you with a little history, because you've got to know what this is. It's very, very important. So the New American reports that the UN Agenda 2030 is simply a recipe for global socialism. It's world government, folks. The United Nations and its most autocratic member regimes have big plans for your life, for your children, for our country, and for the entire world. They're trying to establish a world government. And so let me give you a little history. In 2015, and that's why these things are being so pushed in our schools and different things now. This is 2 years ago. While the establishment media in the United States was hyping ISIS and football and of course, global warming, virtually, getting your mind on all this other stuff, the United Nations was implementing their plan. Virtually every nation, government, dictatorship on the planet met at the 70th Annual General Assembly at the UN headquarters in New York to adopt a draconian 15-year master plan for the planet to be completed by 2030. That's why it's called the Agenda 2030. At the time, top globalists such as former NATO chief Javier Solana, a socialist himself, celebrated the plan, which the summit unanimously approved as the next great leap forward. And yes, I know that was the old campaign slogan of the Chinese Communist Party, but that's what he said. So, the master plan, this Agenda 2030, is comprised of 17 post-2015. So from 2015 to 2030, it's 15 years, and it's the post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And all of these goals have 169 specific targets that they want to hit, and these are to be foisted on all of humanity, literally all of it, every person on the planet, as the plan itself states explicitly this. It states, as we embark on this collective journey, we pledge that no one will be left behind. No one. Every person. And it is in this UN manifesto entitled, Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So they're not even really trying to hide it. Trying to transform the world here. And it's officially dubbed Agenda 2030. Do your research on this. This is not conspiracy theory. This is actually happening, and it's prophesied in your Bible. And we're watching this happening right now. The Agenda 2030, it's the UN plot, as its full title suggests, is aimed at transforming the world. The program is a follow-up to the previous 15-year UN plan, the defunct Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs. It also dovetails nicely with the deeply controversial UN Agenda 21. A lot of you will recognize some of these things. Well, Agenda 21 has morphed into Agenda 2030, even including much of the same rhetoric as that agenda. But the combined Agenda 2030 goals for achieving what is euphemistically called sustainable development. When you hear sustainable development, think world government. It represents the previous UN plan, but really on steroids. I mean, way past what they had planned originally. It's much deeper, it's more radical, it's more draconian, and it's much, much more expensive. I'm talking about in the multiple trillions of dollars annually. So think about that. So the preamble to this plan states this, and I quote, "This agenda is a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity. All countries and all stakeholders acting in collaborative partnership will, not possibly could, but will implement this plan. Now, ironically, the preamble even claims that the UN goals will free the human race from the tyranny of poverty and heal the planet, or as the planet is also referred to in the document, Mother Earth. Now, not so subtly purporting to usurp the role of God, the UN even claimed that the future of humanity and our planet lies in our hands. Well, I can tell you the future of the planet does not lie in if it lies in our hands, we're in trouble. The Bible says it's not in man that walks to direct his own footsteps, but the footsteps of a good man are ordered of the Lord. But the United Nations is a humanistic organization. In other words, we will remove the reliance upon God and we will rely upon ourselves because we are a world government. We're governing the world ourselves. Now, speaking back on September 25th, 2015 at the opening ceremony of the confab that adopted Agenda 2030, then Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, hinted at just how far-reaching the plot really is, this Agenda 2030. He says the new agenda is a promise by leaders to all people everywhere. It is a universal, integrated, and transformative vision for a better world. He also stated that the guide offered by the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, that they're really a to-do list for people and planet and a blueprint for success. It's really a blueprint for world government is what it is. And he states that we must use the goals to transform the world. And then he also said that institutions will have to become fit for a grand new purpose. So the Agenda 2030 agreement makes the audacity of this scheme very clear. This is an agenda of unprecedented scope and significance. Never before have world leaders pledged common action and endeavor across such a broad and universal policy agenda. And then the agreement goes on to state, what we are announcing today, it was said, is that it's an agenda for global action for the next 15 years. It's a charter for people and planet in the 21st century. Now, when we get back, I'll tell you specifically about the agenda and what it's all about. It's very important that you understand this because what we need, I tell you what you ought to do. You ought to ask some of your kids, maybe high school and maybe in college, are you guys getting taught about Agenda 2030, about the Sustainable Development Goals?
Jesus prophesied 2 specific things would occur right before His second coming. In this lesson, this generation shall not pass. Irvin Baxter discloses what those 2 things are and what will happen. He also proves they are in the process of coming to pass right now. Are we the generation that shall not pass until the promise of Jesus' second coming is fulfilled? To find out, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Or order online at endtime.com.
Through the years, we have seen God perform miracle after miracle at End Time Ministries, and we are trusting God for another season of miracles this summer. So we decided that we wanted to share our miraculous story and boost your faith by offering you one of our newest DVDs titled The Miracle Called End Time for free with any purchase of $29 or more. To request your copy, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and mention the code MIRACLE or order online at endtime.com.
So let me see if I can be very specific here and describe the agenda of this 2030 agenda. What's the agenda, the real agenda all about? Well, I could say it in 2 words, world government. But let me be a little bit more detailed than that. Perhaps the single most striking feature of Agenda 2030 is the practically undisguised roadmap to global socialism, corporatism, fascism, and as countless analysts have pointed out already, to begin with, consider the agenda's goal 10. There's 17 goals. Goal number 10, which calls on the UN, national governments, and every person on the earth to reduce inequality within and among countries. To do that, the agreement continues. It's going to, it says it will only be possible if wealth is shared and income inequality is addressed, or wealth redistribution. So as the UN document also makes clear that national socialism to combat inequality domestically is not enough. International socialism is needed to battle inequality even among countries. So taking from developed countries and giving some of their wealth to underdeveloped countries. So what they state is this: by 2030, they want to ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights to economic resources. That's what the document states. Now, in simpler terms, they want Western taxpayers to be prepared to be fleeced so that their wealth can be redistributed internationally as their own economies are cut down to size by big government. Who's going to redistribute this wealth? The United Nations. And of course, as has been the case for generations, most of the wealth extracted from the productive sector is going to be redistributed to the United Nations and third world regimes, not the victims of those regimes or the impoverished, largely through domestic socialistic totalitarian policies imposed by the same corrupt regimes, to be propped up with more Western aid under Agenda 2030. It's wealth redistribution at its finest, folks. And really, wealth redistribution alone, however, is not going to be enough. Governments must also seize control. This is what the plans calls for. They should seize control of the means of production, either directly or through fascist-style mandates. Now, of course, they couch this in awesome terms, like we need to promote equality, get rid of inequality. That's how they would say wealth redistribution. They say, we commit to making fundamental changes in the way that our societies produce and consume goods and services. The document actually states that. They want to control every aspect of every part of your life and my life. It also says that governments, international organizations, the business sector, and other non-state actors and individuals must contribute to changing unsustainable consumption and production patterns to move towards more sustainable patterns of consumption and production. So even down to the food you eat, the electricity that you consume, everything, fossil fuels, they want to control every aspect of your life. Now, in plain English, the Agenda 2030 document really is claiming that today's consumption production patterns, they're unsustainable. So we'll need to get that you and I will need to get by with less. They think they know better than we do and that God does, and so they want to govern every aspect of your life. Now they say you need to get by on less. How much less? Who determines that? It would be hard to find a more clear and concise assessment than that which was offered by the late Maurice Strong. Some of you will recognize his name. And he was he's now deceased, Canadian billionaire, and he was a longtime UN environmental guru who led the 1992 Earth Summit, which was where a lot of this stuff got started. And in a pre-Earth Summit document, he stated this. He said, it's clear that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake I mean, I'm going to be a high meat person for the rest of my life. That's just how it's going to be. Consumption, I just had to throw that in there. I'm sorry. Anyway, moving on. Consumption of large amounts of frozen and convenience foods. Ownership of motor vehicles. Numerous electrical appliances. Home and workplace air conditioning I mean, I live in Texas, no air conditioning, not much goes on. Expensive suburban housing are not sustainable. So you think they don't want to get right down specifically where you live? That's what's going through the mind of these people that are pushing this Agenda 2030. These lifestyles are not sustainable, so they need to be reduced. Who's going to say how much they're reduced? They want to, the world government. And really, in truth, such lifestyles and consumption patterns are sustainable. They are. So long as the freedom that makes prosperity possible is not destroyed in the name of achieving sustainability. If you're willing to come here in America and work hard and become educated and work harder than the next guy, there's nothing wrong with you making a little better wage than the next guy. There's nothing wrong with that. Get this. And let me just talk to this for just a second. I know people who have a high school education that came from a poor background that are millionaires. High school education. You say, well, I didn't get a college education and I didn't catch the brakes, so I can't succeed. That absolutely is not true. Matter of fact, I know a lot of people that are high school educated individuals that just had their heads screwed on right, were willing to take chances, start businesses, learn from mistakes, and get ahead, and they're multimillionaires now. I have a family member who cannot turn on a computer, but took a chance, bought a factory that was losing money, turned it around, and now he's a multimillionaire. So there's really no excuse for somebody who doesn't want to get ahead. There just isn't. Unless, I mean, there might be you know, a handicap or something like that, but I'm just talking about somebody who can get out and work. If you really want to push and do good, you can have a pretty good lifestyle if you want to. But the UN is saying because somebody would take a chance and get ahead, that we need to take some of their money and redistribute that wealth to somebody who is in an impoverished country, and 9 times out of 10, that money will never get to the impoverished individual. The government will take it, or the UN keeps a lot of it. So you see what's going on here? If you want to achieve something here in the United States, you can, if you're willing to work hard enough to get it. And I don't think that any world government should be able to take it away from you. It's just my opinion, and I think I could prove that at any rate. So let's get back to my program here. Sorry I took a rabbit trail, but I feel strongly about this because I've heard excuses about that, and I know people who have come from nothing and made something of themselves because they were willing to take a chance and get ahead and work hard, and they did it, and they had every excuse that somebody else would have. And so, you know, I don't know, just thinking about it. Anyway, the UN and the environmental lobby claim that they must get by with less. That person's consuming too much, so they should get by with less because there are now too many people on the planet consuming too many resources. But this rationale for accepting UN-imposed scarcity is patently false. Now, of course, the promoters of the Agenda 2030 would claim that rather than impoverish the U.S. or impoverish us, the global regime they envision would take good care of us through universal health coverage. In other words, the world government would take care of us rather than we taking care of ourselves. And one of the targets of goal number 3 is ensuring healthy lives and well-being. And that you can achieve this by universal health coverage, including vaccines for all, universal access to mental health, along with sexual and reproductive health care services, which are code words really for abortion and contraception, and they're also included. All governments are expected to integrate such services into their national strategies and programs. The agreement demands these things. And it is worth noting that mass-murdering Soviet dictator Vladimir Lenin made clear that controlled health care is the keystone of socialism. And the United Nations obviously agrees. And although that they may not call it socialism today, Barack Obama undoubtedly viewed governmental control of health care as very key. In fact, the enactment of Obamacare could be viewed as a great leap forward by the United States toward the implementation of a key component of the Agenda 2030 before the Agenda 2030 was even approved. But as important as targeting healthcare is to the global schemers, any plan for building international socialism would be lacking without also targeting the next generation for global socialistic propaganda. And so the entire goal of Agenda 2030 is devoted, get this, to ensuring that all children everywhere are transformed into what the UN calls agents of change, ready to push forward the plan for the new global order. The agreement states that children and young men and women are critical agents of change and will find in the new goals a platform to channel their infinite capacities for activism into the creation of a better world. The sort of activists that the UN hopes to make your children into, also explicitly defined in the agreement, the global plan states that by 2030, we want to ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development, sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality. Have you heard any of this talked about in the news lately? Promotion of a culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship. I just talked to a college student who was considered himself a global citizen in many ways, and appreciation for cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. It's Agenda 2030, folks, and they're trying to train your child and my grandchildren. My kids are out of school now. My grandchildren that will be coming up, they're going to try to indoctrinate them and make them into global citizens and push their global agenda 2030 upon them, to indoctrinate them. So I urge you, and this is the global government that's being established, that's prophesied in Revelation chapter 13, and it's talked about many places throughout Scripture. It's the global government that will be in power at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ. It's one of the most recognizable end-time Bible prophecies, the world government that will be established, that will eventually be ran by the Antichrist. So make sure that you know what your children are being taught at school. It's of utmost importance to all of us.
End of the Age is a production of End Time Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. End Time Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.